I was halfway through my morning coffee when my phone buzzed against the marble countertop, breaking the calm hum of my apartment. The screen lit up with a group chat notification. Family Vacation 2025. Who's in? I froze for a moment, mug hovering midair. The steam curled under my nose, but suddenly, the smell of coffee felt sharp, almost bitter. They still did this, planned everything together like a picture-perfect sitcom family, except back then, I wasn't exactly invited. Not unless I could pay my way. I smoothed the silk sleeve of my blouse, more out of habit than need, and let the phone buzz again. Part of me wanted to ignore it. Another part of me, the girl I used to be, still felt that sting of rejection. I walked toward the window, looking out at the city skyline stretching under the soft morning light. It had taken years to get here, this apartment, this view, this version of me. The me they still thought was just figuring life out. The chat kept lighting up. Plans, flights, hotel links. My younger brother asked, "Maya, you in this year?" I smiled, a slow, knowing smile. Not bitter. Not wounded. Just ready. I typed back, "Sure. But this time, let's do it at my place." Then I hit send and felt my heart thud, a calm, thrilling drumbeat. I can still remember the day it happened. It was a humid July afternoon, the kind where even the ceiling fan seemed to sigh in exhaustion. I was sitting at the kitchen table, laptop open, trying to calculate whether my summer job paycheck could cover rent and groceries. Mom stood by the fridge, scrolling on her phone. "So," she said casually, "we're planning the family trip to Maui. Flights are about $800 each. You can join us, if you can cover your ticket and split the Airbnb." She said it so matter-of-factly, like she was offering me an option, not an ultimatum. I remember staring at the screen, my spreadsheet blurring. "Mom, I don't have that kind of money right now," I said quietly. Dad didn't look up from the sports section. "Then maybe sit this one out," he said. "You're an adult now. Time to stand on your own 2 feet." The words landed like stones in my chest. My hands felt clammy against the cool table surface. I wanted to scream that I was trying, that I was working double shifts, taking night classes, skipping dinners out just to stay afloat. Instead, I swallowed hard and nodded. "Yeah," I said, my throat tight. "Maybe I will." That night, I cried in the dark of my tiny apartment. Not just because I couldn't go, but because I realized something. I was never going to beg to belong. The next morning, I found a small box on my doorstep, a late birthday gift from my grandmother. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet and a handwritten note. "Maya, you have the strength to build your own world. Don't wait for anyone to invite you in." I wore that bracelet to work the next day, and every day after. It became my quiet promise to myself. If I couldn't afford to join them now, one day I'd build a life they couldn't afford to ignore. And that was the day I stopped feeling sorry for myself. That was the day I said, "No thanks." Those first few years were brutal. I kept Grandma's bracelet on my wrist like armor as I dragged myself from one job to another. Waitress in the mornings, receptionist in the afternoons, rideshare driver at night. Most nights, I'd collapse onto my futon, smelling like coffee and cheap perfume, scrolling through social media as my family posted pictures from vacations, barbecues, birthdays. They were smiling in every photo, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd been edited out. But that bracelet reminded me I wasn't forgotten. I was just getting ready. One night, after dropping off my last passenger, I parked under a street lamp, opened my laptop, and filled out an application for a marketing internship I wasn't even sure I was qualified for. 2 weeks later, I got the call. Unpaid, grueling hours, but a foot in the door. That's where I met Dana. She was everything I wanted to be, sharp, confident, the kind of woman who walked into a room and owned it without apology. She saw something in me, even when I doubted myself. "You've got instincts," she told me one late night as we ordered takeout at the office. "Don't waste them settling for scraps. Build something."
And I did.
I spent the next few years climbing, from intern to assistant, assistant to strategist, strategist to running my own small agency. My first big client was a local boutique that couldn't believe I worked out of my apartment. My second client doubled my monthly income. When I signed my first corporate contract, I celebrated alone with a cheap bottle of champagne, sitting cross-legged on my living room floor. I didn't post about it, didn't call my family, didn't give them the satisfaction of knowing I was making it. Instead, I learned to play small online. Occasional posts about busy days and grateful moments, nothing that hinted at the empire I was quietly building. Years passed. I upgraded my apartment, bought better clothes, started traveling, not because someone invited me, but because I wanted to see the world on my own terms. And through it all, I kept that bracelet on my wrist. Every success was a quiet victory, a whispered reminder. They thought you couldn't do it.
You did it anyway.
By the time I signed the lease on my office, a sunlit corner space overlooking the city, I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was thriving. And I was ready for the day they'd see me. When my family agreed to do it at my place, I don't think they expected this. Saturday afternoon, I watched from my floor-to-ceiling windows as their Uber pulled up. My parents stepped out first, looking up at the sleek building with wide eyes. My brother, Josh, whistled low. "Maya lives here?" I heard him say through the glass. I smiled to myself, straightening the last vase of fresh, white tulips on the kitchen island. My apartment was airy, sunlight spilling across the hardwood floors. The walls were lined with framed photos, not of my family, but of moments that built me. My first office lease signing, a snapshot from my solo trip to Paris, a candid shot Dana had taken of me laughing at a late-night brainstorming session. When the elevator dinged, I opened the door before they could knock. "Hi," I said simply, stepping aside. Their eyes darted everywhere as they stepped in. Mom's mouth opened, then closed. Dad took off his baseball cap, holding it in both hands like he was in church. "This is nice," Mom said finally, her voice a little too soft. Josh wandered toward the window. "Nice? This place looks like it's out of a magazine." I let them take it in before I spoke. "Thanks. It's mine. Bought it last year." Dad turned to me sharply. "You bought this?" "Yes," I said, meeting his eyes. "Cash offer. No mortgage." The silence stretched so long I could hear the faint ticking of the wall clock. I gestured toward the dining table, where I'd set out charcuterie and sparkling water.
"Sit.
"I have something to tell you." They did, slowly, as if still processing where they were. I sat across from them, bracelet glinting on my wrist. "You remember when you told me I could join the family trip if I paid my own way?" Mom flinched a little. "Maya." "It's okay," I said gently but firmly. That day changed me. I decided I'd never depend on anyone's invitation to live the life I wanted. I took a breath, letting the weight of the moment land. I own a marketing agency now. We just hit 7 figures this year. I have 5 employees. We work with brands you probably see on TV. Josh's eyes widened. Dad leaned back, exhaling slowly. Mom's hand trembled as she reached for her glass of water. "You never told us," she said quietly. "No," I said, my voice steady. "Because I needed to build this on my own. I needed to know I could." The air felt electric, not hostile, but charged with something new. Dad cleared his throat. "I didn't realize you were doing this well." "I know," I said softly. "That's the point." For the first time, the silence didn't feel heavy. It felt like a curtain had been pulled back, and they were finally seeing me, not as the youngest daughter they had to teach responsibility, but as the woman who had taught herself. I let the silence breathe for a moment longer, then folded my hands on the table. "This trip you're planning?" I said evenly. "I'll cover it." Mom's head snapped up. "Maya, you don't have to." "I know I don't have to," I said gently, but there was steel under the softness. "But if we're going to do this, we're going to do it differently." Dad frowned, like he wasn't sure whether to argue or listen. "Differently how?" I glanced down at my bracelet, feeling its weight before speaking. "I'll pay for everyone's flights and hotel. But on one condition. This time, we're not pretending. No more little digs about who's struggling, who's successful, who's not grown up yet. We treat each other like equals." Josh shifted in his seat, clearing his throat. I think that's fair. And one more thing, I said, my tone firm but not unkind. If I'm going to invest in this family, with money or with time, then we invest in each other. We show up. We support each other's dreams. We stop competing like everything's a scoreboard. Mom blinked, her eyes glassy. I didn't know you felt hurt. I finished for her.
Yeah.
I did. But I'm not angry anymore. I just don't want to go back to that dynamic. I won't. Dad looked down at his hands, then back at me. You're right, he said quietly. We weren't fair to you back then. It felt like a small crack in the wall that had stood between us for years. Josh nodded. Honestly, I think we all needed this wake-up call. For the first time, I felt the knot in my chest loosen. I wasn't just the youngest daughter at the table. I was the woman leading it. I love you guys, I said softly. And I want us to be close. But that starts with honesty, respect, and showing up for each other, not just when it's convenient. Mom reached across the table, her fingers brushing mine. Okay, she whispered. Let's start over. I smiled. Not triumphant, not smug, just peaceful.
Good.
Then pack your bags. We've got a vacation to plan. 2 months later, I stood on a balcony in Maui. The ocean stretched out in endless blue before me. The air smelled of salt and plumeria, warm and alive. Behind me, laughter spilled from the villa, my villa, as my family played cards around the table. Josh was teaching Dad some ridiculous new game, and Mom was sipping a drink, more relaxed than I'd seen her in years. This trip felt different. There were no sarcastic comments about money, no awkward silences when the check came. Instead, there were thank yous, real ones. And little moments that told me something had shifted. Dad asking me about my business, Mom telling me she was proud, Josh talking about starting his own side hustle, and asking for advice. On our last morning, Mom handed me a small seashell she'd found on the beach. Keep this, she said softly. A reminder that sometimes you have to get tossed around a little before you turn into something beautiful. I slipped it into my pocket next to Grandma's bracelet and smiled. That night, as the waves crashed below, I stood alone on the balcony, feeling the breeze play with my hair. The girl who once sat crying in a dark apartment, wishing she could belong, was gone. In her place stood a woman who built her own place in the world and invited everyone else in. I whispered into the night, almost like a prayer. I may have missed that vacation, but I found something better, myself. And for the first time in years, I felt completely, utterly free.